Good boy, Tucker.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
Work smarter where you want.
Consistency is key.
And remember, if it's not in Redtail, it never happened.
This is learning at its most fun.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for another Thursday webinar. My name is Curtis. I am one of the trainers. We also have...
Haley Mandriff, another one of the trainers at Redtail.
Awesome. Just so you know, I might be pointing this way to her, but that's just because I see it this way, but she might actually be over here or up there or down there. We decided to share our screens today, and actually we decided to have two trainers online for this webinar, mainly because this is something that Haley and I have been working on. This actual series came from Haley. It's her brainchild, if you will, because we really wanted to talk about like what's important about setting up your actual calendar so you can use other enhancements later on. So Haley, what was a little bit about like the idea behind this past that?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit, just a little bit ago this morning. I think calendar syncing is something that's so personal to each of us. It really is kind of like your favorite ice cream. It's not the same for everyone.
I love ice cream. What's your favorite flavor, Haley?
Well, see, I'm a special butterfly, right? Because mine is vanilla, but I've recently found out that I'm lactose intolerant. So it has to be like a sorbet or a non-dairy vanilla, like Ben & Jerry's, I think, has one. So it's very particular, you know, and I have to be very particular about which ice creams I can eat or I can't eat. What about yours?
I absolutely also love vanilla, but it's more about that. I like vanilla because it's a base. It's the base of your everything. And then I'm not even kidding. The other night I made brownies. I put a brownie, then vanilla on top, and then I made some whipped cream, homemade whipped cream. Actually, it took a lot of whisking, but homemade whipped cream, chocolate sauce, and a cherry. Super basic, but I love it. But again, not everybody likes everything in that. Maybe you don't like whipped cream. Like Haley couldn't have whipped cream with the lactose, I guess, like you were saying, have to leave that out, have to use the dairy free. The point of what really we're saying here is there's so many different variations of what you need to set up for yourself, like your ice cream, how you set up your calendar. Everybody runs it so differently and you need specifics. And so this series, and especially today, we're going to talk about your options of what you have syncing your calendar, your Redtail calendar with outside programs and what tools Redtail has for you. And so really, we're not going to dive into the usage of the CRM at all much. We're going to show a few things about where you can set these up, but a lot of today is going to be a discussion and just talking about the different options you have for syncing your calendar and what are the benefits or like just different issues you might want to know about, just so we can be sure that you have exactly the type of Sunday that you want.
I was going the same direction. I was like, we're going to start with vanilla as your base, and you're going to learn what sprinkles or magic shell or chocolate syrup you can put on it.
Sprinkles. I forgot. I do not have sprinkles at home, and I need to go pick those up. I'm going to go get some, add to it. So with that being said, let's talk about the options that we have with syncing our calendar. So a few of the tools, and actually 4 of the tools, technically 3, because one of them has 2 options, is going to be the ICal. It's going to be Retriever for Tailwag, which is a desktop sync with Outlook, and then Retriever Cloud, which syncs 2 different types of calendars. It's either Office 365 or Google. And so we're going to cover all of these options to tell you how they do sync, what they do, what they don't. I do want to point out that the second tools, the Retriever tools, also have the ability to sync contacts, but we're really not going to dive into that because today's focus is really talking about the calendar. So we will mention if it has the ability to sync contacts as well, but keep in mind, we're not going to dive too far into that specifically. So let's talk about the first one, ICal. Now the ICal itself is syncing, it's not the Apple version of ICal. ICal is actually talking about the internet calendar. And so your internet calendar can actually exist in a few different places, like on your cell phone. Like on my cell phone, I can actually set up an ICal feed. It's an iPhone. I can set up to Outlook itself has an internet calendar, but it's separate from actually syncing directly with Outlook. Maybe it's your calendar on your Mac computer, or you have a web-based calendar like Google as well. If you have somewhere where you can send a feed for an online calendar, you most likely have the ability to use ICal.
You might have an online calendar and not even know about it, right, Curtis? You might have like a Yahoo or an AOL or...
Definitely true. Exactly. Like every instance of like a program now has a calendar tool. And it really comes down to if you want to sync your Redtail calendar and send it over to that internet calendar. Now, what I want to be specific about here is this is only one way. It goes from Redtail to the internet calendar. The ICal, you do not have the ability to update the activities when they get sent over. Okay, so it's just, you have to make the changes and additions on the Redtail side, and then it's a view only option on that internet calendar. Now, personally, this is the option that I use. I don't sync my calendar with Outlook, or I actually don't even use Outlook. I actually just sync my calendar, my Redtail calendar, with my phone. And the reason I do that is because I don't necessarily add information directly to my phone. I add everything into Redtail. I add it into the Redtail mobile app, which is adding it directly to Redtail itself. The reason I want it to sync to my phone is because before I fall asleep at night, I like to pull up my phone, look at the native phone calendar, and see what I have in the morning. See if I actually have to wake up at 6:30 or if I can actually sleep in a little bit till 7. You know, now that we're working from home, I sleep in a little more than I do. So keep that in mind. This is just to view the calendar for what's going on. Now, a few of the requirements is, and actually one of the requirements we're going to have for all these calendars is you need the Redtail CRM. Okay, so you'll see in our first column of requirements, the Redtail CRM is going to be required for all of these, but also the internet calendar. So whether it's Google, Yahoo, Outlook, or an iOS device. The benefits, like I said, is it's a view-only calendar if you only need to see what's going on. So a lot of the times, again, I just need to see what my day is going to look like, what's happening. This is a great tool to use. There's actually not much like setup to it. You start once and it's good to go. And anything time you add to Redtail, it's going to update and show on your actual internet calendar itself. Now,
so while there are definitely more exciting options, you know, that we're going to go over, I just want to talk about some more applications for the ICal. I love your example, Curtis. You just want to check your calendar. I've also seen advisors use this as a way to share their calendar with maybe a spouse or a family member so that they can see where that person's at or what's on their docket for the day, what's on the calendar for the day. And that person cannot edit, they cannot change any of the information, but they can view it so they know kind of where that person is and what's going on.
That's actually a great idea. I love that aspect. So what you're saying is, like, say I have a spouse and they need to know what's going on with my calendar, like anything in my Redtail calendar, essentially I can set it up on their iOS device. Now, if it's iOS or internet calendar, the benefit is it's actually syncing. It's not adding it natively to their calendar. It's like a view. So if they don't always want to see it, they can on their calendar turn off the view, then turn it back on and just view it whenever they want. Yeah. So that's a great tool. You can send it, you know, to an assistant, a spouse, somebody who needs to know what's going on with your calendar.
Well, and one more clarification too. You can edit the activity. You can, but those edits just don't make it back to Redtail. That's the main difference. So you can go in and change whatever you'd like about the activity, but none of those changes will go back into Redtail. It's not allowing access to go back that direction. Yeah. One of the main things you would use, right, is the notifications feature. Maybe you've turned on ICal to your phone, for example, and Curtis, you've got a really important meeting. You might set a reminder for that for like 15 minutes before and get a buzz on your phone for it.
Yep, definitely, exactly. And so again, that's all default based on whatever calendar you're syncing to controls those kind of notifications. That's outside of Redtail. So do keep that in mind. But now also with the ICal, it does sync. It's scheduled. It really actually depends on the calendar you're syncing with. Now, we essentially set up to where it syncs once daily. But again, that can change. I know for a fact that my phone, it actually, with the ICal, is pulling the information from Redtail. Redtail is not pushing it to it. The ICal actually just allows you to open up and view the calendar. So whatever calendar is in charge that you're syncing it to is the one that is actually pulling the information in. So that is one difference. The ICal itself is not a push from Redtail. It's a pull in the other direction. So in the case of my phone, it actually pulls the information pretty quick. I think it's like every 10 minutes, it kind of searches and pulls that information. But most calendars are set up just once a day. So keep that in mind. You can't really rely on that as more than once a day, but at least once a day, it'll update that calendar. Now, a few items to note that we do want to talk about. Like Haley already said, I already said you cannot add or edit activities that sync to the Redtail calendar on the internet calendar side. It really is all control is on Redtail. Also, it's a required setup on each device. The devices don't talk to each other because it's just a view option. So if you want it not only going to like your Outlook calendar, but also your phone, you have to set it up on each one of these. Now, for ICal to work, I'm actually going to switch over to the CRM here. So from the CRM, there's a few things you need to make sure you have turned on first in order to use this option. The first one we're going to talk about is actually going to our name in the top right-hand corner here, and I'm going to choose Preferences. You need to actually have the option to allow ICal access turned on. Most of the time it is enabled. So if I scroll down, and you'll see under the Calendar Management section right here, if I scroll down, the very last item says allow ICal access, and it says yes. So you need to make sure this is turned on to yes in order to actually use this integration. Once it is, and you change that, if it says no, and then you're going to hit Save Preferences, what you can do now is you need to go to the device where you want your calendar going. Now, even though I'm in Redtail here, if I want it to go to my phone, my actual iPhone, I would need to open up the browser on my phone, log into Redtail, just go to redtailtechnology.com, log in directly there, and you can use the site in its full advantage, just how we have here. You're going to go to the calendar page, and then from the calendar up at the top, choose Actions, and then choose Subscribe to ICal feed, and that's all from your phone. So again, you log in directly to the database on your phone, and then you're going to hit Subscribe to ICal feed under the Actions button. That's going to give you a pop-up. I'm actually going to hit it right now. It's going to say, okay, hey, it wants to open up this internet calendar and start syncing. You'll normally just hit Open Calendar. The iPhone automatically goes right away. Sometimes if it's like your Outlook or like your Mac computer calendar, things like that, you'll need to enable some things. But keep in mind, each device is slightly different, but that's the initial setup. All right. So again, that's ICal. The next program we want to talk about is, let's talk about Retriever for Tailwag. So Haley, do you want to explain what Retriever for Tailwag is?
Yes, so Retriever for Tailwag is a desktop tool for PC users. So if you're on a PC, not a Mac or not an Apple device, then you can download this desktop application, which will sync your calendar either one way from Redtail to that desktop Outlook, or both ways. You can turn on, you kind of have a little flexibility here if you just want to have all the control in Redtail and send to Outlook, or if you want it to go ahead and go back and forth, so that you do have the ability to add activities to your Outlook on that desktop and sync them back to Redtail. And
I like that we got options with this one. More than just one, we got options.
You got options, and there's even more, right? Because when you're syncing to your desktop Outlook, if you have an email account set up on there, depending on that type of email account, that might then sync your calendar to your phone or your tablet or other additional devices from there. So there's options on options.
Awesome. So the benefits that we have, actually, no, sorry, requirements first. Again, Redtail CRM, you need to have the Redtail in order to sync Redtail. And the second requirement is going to be a desktop version of Outlook. Now, again, if you subscribe to Office 365, this might not be the version you want to go with. We have other ones which will come later, but a desktop version of Outlook is required, because Retriever for Tailwag is specifically going to download a program that's going to sync on your desktop with the actual desktop version of Outlook. Now, the benefits, like Haley was saying, is it syncs anywhere. So anywhere there's an email account, your phone, once you send it and it syncs with that Outlook, if that Outlook desktop version is syncing with your phone, your other Outlook on your other computer, everything is going to sync with it. Now, keep in mind, you only want to set up Retriever for Tailwag for one instance per user. So if you have a laptop and a desktop computer and you log in with only one Redtail username, you do not want to download this program on both computers. That's going to cause duplicates. You only need it to sync with one of your computers. The other option is linking. You can link to calendar scheduling tools. Now, this is exciting. And actually, this has to do with part 2. This is an option you can use to actually use those other integrations. And Haley, you love talking about calendar syncing tools. you want to give a little like preview of what next week is going to be about?
Yeah, so here's your teaser. If you're a user of your Redtail or your Outlook desktop, so you've opened Outlook as a program on your computer, Outlook has these add-ins, and you can add in Schedule Once or Calendly or Acuity or Microsoft Bookings. You have options to use scheduling tools, or even Zoom is an add-in too. I mean, that's not even calendar scheduling, but you can add in all these fun little tools, all these sprinkles, and connect them with your calendar on that desktop Outlook. And then remember, if your Redtail's syncing to that desktop calendar, now you've got the connection going further than just that desktop Outlook.
Awesome. So keep in mind, that is something that we are going to dive into next week for part 2 of the calendar syncing series. But today I do want to point out that if you want to use a calendar scheduling tool, this is one of the options that you have to sync your calendar first. So again, this allows you to sync to other calendars like your Outlook, actually Outlook desktop, so you can use those other options. Now in the items to note, activities created in Outlook. Now this is a big one. Retriever for Tailwag does have the ability to sync contacts. But again, we're only talking about calendar right now. But it does sync contacts from Redtail to Outlook. But what we want to talk about is if you create an activity in Outlook and it's for a specific contact record, because Outlook is not a CRM, it doesn't sync contacts with the activities. When that activity gets added over into the Redtail side, it can't automatically link up with a contact record. So normally we suggest always still manage your calendar in Redtail. So that way it syncs over to Outlook side, it knows which contact you're supposed to deal with. So again, we just like to point out, if you do happen to add an activity on the Outlook side, it's going to sync over to Redtail, but it will not link up automatically with a contact record. Now, it doesn't mean you can't go in after and link the contact, but it just causes more work because it can't automatically do that. Now, another thing I want to point out is in Redtail, when you create an activity, you have the option of choosing an activity type. Okay, so the activity type, there's a default one on everybody's Redtail that's called task. If you create an activity and you're using Retriever for Tailwag, the desktop version, and you choose the activity type of task, it is going to sync to the task section of Outlook, not the calendar section. So we do like to point that out. So again, if you're creating tasks in Redtail, activity type of task, it'll sync to the task section and not the calendar. So it's very important to note there.
So one really big benefit of using Retriever for Tailwag is that you don't have to have a certain email host to use this. You just have to have a desktop version of Outlook, which is super common to have an installed version of Outlook. Another great benefit of Retriever for Tailwag is that it only syncs when your computer is on. So maybe you don't need to have it constantly syncing online, so you can kind of control when it syncs and when it doesn't sync to your calendars back and forth. And then kind of a final third benefit to it is that it syncs to that default calendar in your Outlook program. And that's really useful. It'll come in for part 2. That's especially useful for the calendar syncing program, Microsoft Bookings. And I'll re-mention that in part 2. But if any of those calendar syncing tools have a limitation on it being the default, like Microsoft Bookings, this would be the way to go.
Actually, Haley, on top of that, so Retriever for Tailwag does sync with the default, but you actually have the ability to choose a different subfolder if you don't want. So if you're unfamiliar with Outlook and their calendars, what happens is you have a folder for your default calendar, like your default contacts. You can actually choose where it's syncing to. Okay, it's going to go to the default, but if you want to create a sub calendar, like in Redtail, because you can create multiple, in Outlook, you can create multiple calendars in Outlook. You can choose a sub calendar that's going to sync to as opposed to the default. What's great about the Retriever for Tailwag, though, even though it's a desktop version, you actually have the most control over everything in this version. Like, so even though there are some, some downsides to it because it is desktop, you have more control. You get to choose when it syncs, if it syncs, however you want. And that's, a lot of people prefer the control over their calendar sync. And so that's something I do love to point out in that aspect. Now, if you do want to set up and use Retriever for Tailwag, what you're going to do is I'm going to swing back over to the CRM here, is you need to download the Retriever for Tailwag program. Now, again, because it's a download, we're actually going to go right here. It's not an integration. So we're not going to go to our name and choose integrations. We're going to go to the question mark in the top right-hand corner. And once you click that, you can scroll down, and right here, the bottom right, it says download retriever for Tailwag. Now, this is only for PC users. So if you have a Mac, unfortunately, you cannot use the retriever for Tailwag. Haley and I are actually both on Macs. We use other syncing tools, that's fine. But this is only downloaded to a PC. So keep that in mind. If you want to download it, you click on this button, it'll download the program. I also suggest, we have this help desk article. This actually takes you through setting up everything from the retriever for Tailwag, and it'll walk you through step by step, like what you want to sync. Now, again, keep in mind, this program can also sync contact information. It does do that. That is one way from Redtail to Outlook. But the calendar can go one way from Redtail to Outlook, or both ways if you want. You have that option. But again, we'll most likely paste this article as well in the recorded version of this, so you have access to it. But you need to download it from the CRM after you're logged in. Again, the question mark in the top right, then down at the bottom, choose download retriever for Tailwag. And then you get to set up what you want to sync at that point.
I'm really going to wear out our comparison with ice cream here, because that article points out all of the sprinkles, all of the chocolate syrup, all of the caramel, all of the different nuances to that program. Anytime, and this just goes for any technology program ever, like whenever you're setting up a technology program, check out those preferences, read through the options, and make sure you're understanding and testing out what that program is going to do. Does it do what you think it's going to do? Does it do what you want it to do? Is it what you're looking for? Is it the solution for your office? Yep. One little fun tidbit about that program is there's little question marks in it. So when you're in Retriever for Tailwag, you can hover over those question marks and it'll give you more info about that feature as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And that's actually it. If it's something you're not sure about, you're not sure what best works for you, you can always contact our support team. You can talk to us. We can have the conversation with you. If you're just not sure what's going to work out best for you, but again, like we have so many different options because everybody runs it slightly differently. And it really is coming down to choosing what's your foundation, what's most important to you, what's the flavor of ice cream, and then build on it from there. So the last tool actually has two parts to it that I want to talk about, is Retriever Cloud. Now, Retriever Cloud syncs with two different calendars. It's going to be your Office 365 or your Google. Actually, Haley, if I'm not mistaken, you can actually sync both at the same time, correct?
You can. I don't know really why.
Right.
Yeah, but you could.
it might clutter, but it's actually the same tool, and you can enable if you want it to be Office 365 or if you wanted to enable it for Google. Now, the benefit of this calendar is it goes both ways. I can add it into Redtail, I could add it into my Office 365 or Google, and it syncs back. Now, this one itself syncs contacts and or calendar. And this one actually, again, like I said, we're not going to dive into contacts, but this one syncs contacts back the other way. So you can add a contact in that program and it syncs back into Redtail. Now, this one has a few more benefits and items to note. Again, requirements, you need the Redtail CRM. And then the other requirement is either Office 365, a Microsoft Exchange account, or a Google email account. So these are all online calendars. You need to have one of them in order to sync and use Retriever Cloud. Now,
we're kind of progressing from like the simplest and most available to everybody, because everybody's got a Yahoo address hanging around somewhere, right? For our ICal option. And then Retriever for Tailwag. There are still Outlook desktop instances, definitely. But then Retriever Cloud is the cloud-based program that we're looking for, but not everybody has an Outlook 365 as their host or a Microsoft Exchange server or a Google email account to be able to sync to that internet calendar.
Exactly. And I do like how you point that out. Like, this is probably the most robust. There's a few things that you lose control over, but that's normally fine. Now, benefits here is going to be, again, you have access to your Redtail calendar anywhere, where the email account is. So it's on your phone, it's on your Outlook, wherever you have access to it if it's syncing with Office 365 or Google. So again, you just have to set it up once and it's syncing. Also, again, for what we're going to talk about for part 2, is this gives you the ability to use calendar syncing or scheduling tools that link with Office 365 or Google. So again, it's a way to bridge the gap between those programs that don't work directly with Redtail, where you can work with them. All right. So again, this is just sort of a bridge between scheduling apps. Then also keep in mind, this will allow you to actually choose which specific activity types you can sync to and from Redtail. So on Retriever for Tailwag, the desktop version, remember I said that all activity types are going to sync, but the activity type of task is going to go to the task section of Outlook. Whereas this option, it's going to send even activity type of task to the calendar still. So there's not a task section it's sending to anymore. But you can actually say, I only wanted to sync my appointments and my client review or client meeting, whatever types you have, you can choose that it's only syncing these specific types. If you don't want it to sync tasks, you don't have to. What were you saying, Haley?
Can we bring that up in the CRM, just kind of open an activity?
Oh yeah, definitely. Let's do that.
See, because I know for me, I have a bunch of different options.
Yeah, so to set up the integration for the Retriever Cloud program, what you're going to do is go to your name in the top right, and you're going to go to Manage Your Integrations. Now, this is going to have to be done for each user who wants to sync their actual information in the CRM. So if you set it up, it is not setting up for everybody in your office. It's syncing your calendar items with your Outlook or Google items. So what I'm going to do is scroll down, and once you're on Manage Your Integrations, you're going to find, got it down here, Retriever Cloud right here. You got the logo, and you're going to choose the action icon, the toggle item, and then choose Settings. And this is going to pop up and show, okay, what do you want to sync? Now from here, again, you'll notice I can choose to sync contacts, or I can turn it off. I can keep it on however I want. But right here is what we're talking about. When you sync activities, which activity types do you want to sync? You can say, I want everything to sync. Keep in mind, if you don't check something here, and actually, Haley, keep in mind, if nothing's selected, does it sync all, or do you still have to choose something?
It syncs all of them. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. So right here, if you have sync activities and it says select activity types, it will sync everything. But if you say, I only want to sync appointments, everything that's marked as a client meeting or client review and client lunches, you can go down and be very specific as what you want syncing. Because not everybody wants everything on their calendar to sync over, and you have control over that. Also, the sync completed. You can choose, if I complete the activity in Redtail, do I still want it to sync? Easy enough. Yes, you can check, I do want it to sync still. Also,
so keep in mind, that one means, right, if you complete it in Redtail, it's going to disappear off that Google or that Outlook calendar.
Oh, great. Yes. Great. That is true. So again, if this is unchecked, what you're saying, Haley, is if I complete it in Redtail, it'll disappear from the calendar, correct?
From your Outlook or Google Calendar, right? So in a really silly example, we were looking at our steps. You track your steps on the Apple Watch. And I was trying to figure out what I did a certain day. And I was trying to go back on my Google Calendar, and it was completely empty, and I couldn't figure out why. That's why I had sync completed checked. So I had to go into Redtail to see what I was doing on that particular day. So keep that in mind. So, and some people prefer that it disappears so that you know, oh, it's taken care of. But if you're ever on your phone or your device or whatever, and you're looking at your calendar and you're looking at why yesterday's empty, you might have this option selected.
Okay, awesome. Also, deletion, same thing, like sync deletions into Redtail. So if you delete it on the Outlook side or the Google side, it'll also delete it on Redtail. Is that correct?
It will, yes. And I just personally, I do not recommend checking this option. I really would recommend that we keep Redtail as the end-all be-all, because when it is deleted in Redtail, it goes into the deleted activities report, and it's just more controlled. It also, keep in mind that your activities, if they're linked to a contact record, it might not have to be deleted. It probably should be completed for some reason. Best practice, I would say, is not selecting that option, but it has been highly requested from a lot of clients. So of course we did add that option for you guys.
Awesome. And then also here you have the option to set an activity reminder. Now this reminder is coming from the tool you're syncing to, correct? Like this will be a reminder in Outlook or Google that's going to populate.
Yes. Yeah. So this is going to set a default for all of them based on however they come in that calendar. Those calendars might have additional features where you can set different preferences for different types of activities within their own systems, but there's one reminder for anything you're syncing from Redtail to those calendars.
Awesome. Yeah, and a lot of people, that's why I've seen a lot of people want to sync their calendar outside of Redtail, is because they want the reminder on their phone or they want it to pop up on their Outlook. So this is where you can actually set that reminder, and this is a great option for that. Now, once you set these up, you're going to see there's two buttons, Enable Outlook Sync or Enable Google Sync. Once you click either option, it's then going to ask you to log in to that specific item. I believe, Haley, if you're already logged into like your Google account, it should automatically go, correct?
Yeah, it might even happen very quickly.
Yeah, so if you're already logged in, your desktop's already using that, it's a super simple setup. But with Office 365, where it says Enable Outlook Sync, this is you'll have to log in with your Office 365, and it sets it up. Now, items to note about this. It creates a separate folder for your calendar and your contacts at that. So when you have a default mail folder on your Outlook or Google, that's the default to the program. But what's going to happen here is it's going to create a subfolder for calendar called Redtail. I believe it puts the date that you start syncing on it to, and you can change that. But the Redtail folder is what's going to sync between the two.
Right.
Now that means if you add an activity on Google or Outlook, you need to choose the Redtail folder, not the default. So is that correct? So you can choose it when you create the activity?
Right. So you want to look at your activities, especially on your phone, that little device, right? When you have it up and you're adding an activity, there's a new option you probably haven't selected before that'll give you the ability to change that calendar. And it usually just says calendar. You can change that to Redtail 7, 16, 2020. I had to look at what day it was. But then you can adjust it. And usually in Outlook, when you're in Outlook online, it's at the very top header of the activity itself. Or if you're viewing the calendar, you can click on the Redtail calendar to add to that calendar versus adding to the default.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, again, like we said, like the retriever for Tailwag syncs to the default one. So again, like that's, you have more control, but you have the loss of the benefit of like the automatic sync. It has to be on. This one, again, syncs almost, it actually is instantly. If I add it to Redtail, it instantly syncs over to my Outlook calendar, vice versa. I love how fast it is for that. And the reason it can do that is it's online. The desktop version is on your computer. It takes time to run the sync, things like that. It takes up computer, take the time. But this one is all online, goes super fast. So as long as you have internet, you're good to go. Also, Haley, and you might want to explain this a little more. If you send a calendar invite from Outlook, it's the Redtail activity description can be sent. So if you send an invite to a client and you put information in the description, they're going to see that information, correct?
Right. So when we talk about an activity in Redtail, the description, that big, beautiful text box that you just want to type in, that really should be used for like an agenda or something that's general. That, keep in mind, that description sends out via email to other users if they're added as attendees on that activity. So it's already something that leaves the system, unlike a note, which never leaves the system. So when we're syncing our calendars with an outside calendar like Google or Outlook, we're sending that description over to their description or their giant text box that they normally have in their activities as well. And when you invite someone to that calendar event, they're on that exact calendar event. They're not getting a copy of it for their own calendar. They're actually sharing that event with your calendar. So if you move it, it moves on their calendar. So if you put anything in the description, like I'm really not looking forward to this meeting with Curtis, you're going to see that.
Now, actually, that can be a benefit or a negative. It's like it can go two ways, and it really depends on. I've seen a lot of people use the description for just their regular notes about the activity. Now, it's not wrong. It's not intended, but it's not wrong. And so, really, what we want to point out is if you write something in the description in Redtail and you've sent an invite of that activity on the Outlook side, they're gonna see that description. So be aware that what you add in Redtail can still be viewed by that client itself. It's not sending directly to us, it's coming from the Outlook because the activities, the description of the activity is syncing between the two. Now again, that could be a benefit or that can be a negative. We just wanna make you aware of it. All right, so keep in mind, you wanna have a structure of how you're creating things.
So just to give a recommendation on like the best way to use this and get the best of all the worlds, you'd want to create your activity in Redtail because you can link the contact to that activity. You could potentially use an activity template for that type of meeting that populates the description with an agenda. And then you could add additional attendees if needed, all within Redtail. And then that calendar event, as it's already set up and linked to everything it needs to be linked to in Redtail, syncs to Google or Outlook. And then you go into your Google or Outlook calendar and send the invite to the client, if that's the way that you're going to be sending invites. And that way they're going to get that invitation. It's going to stay on that additional Redtail calendar. If you do start the opposite way, there's just a couple things to note. If you do send the invite from your default calendar in Outlook, then you're going to have to make a duplicate on your Redtail calendar in Outlook, because that's the one that can sync back to Redtail, or you might have to drag and drop it over. And then once it syncs into Redtail, you're going to have to go into the Redtail activity and link it to the appropriate contact and adjust the attendees or make any other changes like that. So the easier way is to start in Redtail, since that's where that's your record for the future anyway. It's going to turn into a note. It's going to maintain that historical record on that contact record.
Yep. And actually that's a great thing to point out, is all three of these options is our suggestion is still manage everything from Redtail. All right. So that's, you don't have to, but we're saying we suggest you have better control over everything that's happening if you add everything into Redtail. Now, again, you can use the app, you can use the mobile app, and that adds directly to Redtail still, so you can link the contact to it. You just have a lot less follow-up work when you're managing everything in Redtail. And that actually comes down to why I don't use an Outlook calendar or other calendars, because I do everything in Redtail. So that's why the ICal is best for me. And actually, on top of that, on this next slide, it's what works best for you. You know, so again, like ICal, if you manage everything in Redtail, you don't have outside calendars, but you still just want to see it somewhere, honestly, the ICal option is going to be your best bet. It's just so you can view the calendar elsewhere. I love what Haley mentioned. If you have a spouse or like someone else who needs to see your calendar, but they don't add anything to your calendar, you can set it up so that they can see your ICal feed too. You can actually set it up on each device you have, your tablet, anybody's tablet. All you have to do is log into your Redtail account on that device and choose to subscribe to ICal. Now, again, if you want more control, we have the desktop version. A desktop version of Outlook, you can sync both ways or one way from Redtail to Outlook. It's all about control. You get to choose how often it syncs. And then, again, the more robust option is the Office 365 or Google using Retriever for Tailwag. But again, a little less control, but it syncs everything. You know, it's automatically super fast. You have that ability. And again, it's the last two, the Retriever for Tailwag and Retriever Cloud have the option to sync contacts too. Again, we're not really diving into that, but you do have that option.
Whenever I talk to clients and kind of spell out the calendar syncing options, it's inevitable that somebody says, oh, the Retriever Cloud is the best option. And I'm always cautious to agree, because it's not the best. It may look like the best or the most robust, but it's not what's right for everyone, right? As cool as it is, I might be lactose intolerant, so I can't have that ice cream option. Okay, I'm done. That's the last time I'll bring up ice cream, I promise.
Now, even there's sorry to step on this. There's even some restrictions, like certain broker dealers allow certain things. Is that correct, Haley?
Right.
So maybe your BD doesn't want you to have sprinkles on your sundae. That's fine. It's not their fault. It's about they're controlling the information that they need to. But again, that means it's not going to be best to use all of these, or you have to use just a certain one.
Right. So that's where the Retriever for Desktop definitely comes into play, and is something that most people are going to have access to on that PC option. If you have Outlook 365 or a Google hosted or a Microsoft Exchange account, there are still limitations, like Curtis mentioned. You might have an administrator who has not allowed permission to all your email accounts to have that ability. If you feel like you have one of those restrictions, reach out to your email host, and they'll be able to confirm if they have that restriction on that program or not. Usually it's Outlook 365, but Google can have it as well.
Awesome. And actually, Haley, what's your Sunday like for your calendar syncing? What is Sunday with an AE, not a AY?
I use both ICal and Outlook 365 in Google. So ICal, I do have sending to my husband's phone so he can see when I have appointments. That's how he knows when he gets home at 3:30, if I'm on a call at 3:30, to be quiet, to come in. With this working from home environment, it's been very useful for him to see if I'm in the middle of a call or not. And then I use Outlook 365. I created a free Outlook 365 account just through the Microsoft program. And I use it to go ahead and sync with Calendly, which we're going to talk about on part 2, and all of those preferences that make the calendar scheduling program a great addition to that option in this calendar syncing series.
I love that. So again, what we all wanted to cover today was just what are your options? What's your base that you can set up with to sync your calendar? And then next week, Haley and I will both be back, and we're going to talk about like those sprinkles. What kind of sprinkles can you add on?
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.